All right, let's jump right in, shall we? Today we're doing a deep dive into Revelation chapter 7. You've sent in some really interesting stuff from a study guide. It's from a website called MCS, and it looks at this chapter from a Jewish perspective.
Uh-huh.
We're going to try to figure out who these groups of people are, the 144,000, and then this huge multitude, and yeah, what their roles are in this part of Revelation.
Yeah, and it starts with this really vivid image, right? You've got these four angels holding back the winds at the four corners of the earth. Total stillness.
Whoa, so imagine that for a second. No wind anywhere. It's like this pause.
Exactly. It's like God himself is pressing pause on the world before something big is about to happen.
It's eerie, like the calm before the storm.
And then we're introduced to these two groups, right? The 144,000 and this massive multitude.
Yeah, let's start with those 144,000 sealed servants. Our source says it's 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. But they're not just any 12,000, right?
Right. They're specifically chosen and marked for this special purpose during the tribulation.
Like an elite squad almost.
Yeah, exactly.
But here's where things get really interesting. The order of the tribes is all mixed up. It's not the traditional order at all. And Dan and Ephraim are totally missing.
Right.
Now, we all know about the golden calf incident with Ephraim, right?
Well, yeah.
Well, our source suggests that their exclusion here, and Dan's too, is like this reminder about the lasting effects of idolatry. Like even generations later, God's choices are deliberate.
Makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not about whole tribes being saved or condemned. Maybe it's more about individual selection.
Right, like a divine purpose at play.
Makes you wonder if there's some hidden meaning behind the order of the other tribes too.
There are a lot of different interpretations out there. Some theologians even believe that the 144,000 represent the church, not just individuals. What do you think?
I mean, it's definitely something to think about. But let's not forget about that huge multitude.
Right.
It's like going from black and white to full color. Suddenly we've got this massive crowd, you can't even count them all. And they're from every nation, every tribe, every language, standing before God's throne, clothed in white robes, waving palm branches.
It's quite a scene. Our source connects this to Sukkot, the Festival of Booths. It's all about celebration and Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's a pretty stark contrast from the 144,000, huh?
What jumps out at you about this image?
I don't know, just the sheer size of it, I guess. This idea that salvation is open to everyone. It doesn't matter where you come from. I mean, imagine those aerial shots you see of huge crowds. But this time, it's every single nation, every tribe.
Every language?
It's amazing.
And if you look closer, you'll see they actually have something in common with the 144,000. They're all wearing white robes.
Yeah, what do you think that symbolizes? Purity,
Yeah.
redemption.
Exactly. Washed clean, made new.
And it says they're washed clean by the blood of the Lamb. So both groups, united by their salvation through Jesus' sacrifice.
It really highlights the unifying power of faith, wouldn't you say?
For sure. It's a powerful image.
And, our source also points out the blessings promised to this vast multitude. No more hunger, no more thirst, no more scorching sun.
Those are some pretty amazing perks, especially during the tribulation.
Yeah, think about it. Finding sanctuary in God's presence, even when everything around you is chaotic. How does that resonate with you?
I mean, we all go through tough times, right? We all face challenges. But this idea that faith can bring you strength and comfort during those times, I think that's something we can all relate to.
It's a universal truth. And it's not just about finding peace, it's about being cared for. Our source points out this beautiful image of the Lamb. He's shepherding the multitude, leading them to springs of living water.
It's like a parent comforting their child during a storm.
Yeah, exactly.
This really tender image in the midst of all this tribulation.
What does that image make you think of?
Well, it definitely evokes this feeling of safety and comfort, Like even when things are at their darkest, God's love is always there. Sometimes when you feel completely lost and overwhelmed, and then suddenly something shifts. You find strength you didn't know you had, or you see a glimmer of hope.
It's like those springs of living water aren't just about quenching your thirst. They're about satisfying a much deeper longing, this need for meaning and purpose.
Yeah, and connection with something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder if that's why this scene resonates so much with people. This universal need to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel cared for. But it also makes you ask, what about the people who aren't a part of this?
That's the big question, isn't it? We've been talking about the blessings for the redeemed, right? The 144,000, this massive multitude. But what about everyone else?
It's like the chapter's leaving us hanging. We're left to ponder what happens to the rest.
Our source doesn't directly address their fate. But there are hints,
Mhm.
clues hidden in the text.
Yeah, and this contrast we see between the redeemed and those who are experiencing the full force of the tribulation, it's almost like a visual representation of the choice we all have to make.
A choice with eternal consequences, yeah.
The peace and security of the redeemed, juxtaposed against the suffering and turmoil of those outside. It's a powerful reminder that our choices matter.
What we believe, how we live, it all has an impact.
So, while this chapter doesn't explicitly say what happens to those who haven't accepted God's grace, it definitely prompts us to ask ourselves, what path am I on?
That's the key takeaway here. Revelation 7 isn't just some ancient story, it's a message for us today.
It's a call to action.
To examine our hearts, to think about what truly matters, and to choose the path that leads to eternal life.
This is a lot to think about,
It is.
but it's worth wrestling with these questions, don't you think?
Absolutely. Sometimes the most profound insights, they come from grappling with the things we don't fully understand.
So where do we go from here? What's the next step in our deep dive?
We were talking about the blessings promised to this massive multitude. No hunger, thirst, or scorching sun. It's easy to just kind of skim over those things. But don't forget, this is all happening during the tribulation, a time of intense suffering.
Yeah, that context really adds another layer, doesn't it?
It's like those blessings become more than just physical comfort.
Right. It's God's protection, His care, even in the middle of all that chaos.
Exactly. It actually reminds me of Psalm 23, where David talks about being led beside those quiet waters and finding peace, even in the valley of the shadow of death.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
Is
It's all about trust, isn't it?
Yeah.
That deep trust in God.
trusting that even when things are tough,
Yeah.
He's there. He's guiding you.
That really resonates with me, especially when I think about all the challenges we face.
It's a universal truth. Life is full of curveballs.
Oh, yeah.
But this passage in Revelation, it's like this beacon of hope.
It is
It reminds us that there's a refuge
a place of peace.
and security in God's presence.
And it's not just about finding peace. It's also about being cared for. Our source talks about this beautiful image of the Lamb shepherding the multitude, leading them to springs of living water.
I love that image.
So powerful.
Yeah, and what's really striking is this contrast. You get this terrifying tribulation happening. But then you have this incredibly tender image of God wiping away every tear, providing comfort.
Like a parent soothing a child.
Exactly.
What does that make you think of?
I don't know.
When you see that in your mind?
I guess it evokes this feeling of safety, of comfort. This reminder that even in the darkest times, God's love and compassion are always there.
I think about those moments in life when you feel completely lost, like totally overwhelmed, and then something shifts.
Yeah.
You find a strength you didn't know you had, or a glimmer of hope appears.
And maybe that's what those springs of living water represent, not just quenching physical thirst, but this deeper thirst
For meaning.
for purpose, for
Mhm.
connection with something bigger than ourselves.
That makes a lot of sense. Maybe that's why this part of Revelation resonates so much with people. It speaks to this universal human longing for comfort, for security, to be taken care of. But it also makes you wonder, what about the people who aren't there, who aren't a part of this?
That's the question, isn't it?
The big one.
We've been focusing on the blessings of those who are redeemed.
Right.
But what happens to everyone else?
Right.
Our source doesn't explicitly say.
It's like they're leaving us hanging, making us think about it.
Yeah, it is. But there are some clues, I think, embedded in the text.
Yeah, this contrast
Yeah.
between those who are redeemed and those who are experiencing the full force of the tribulation.
It's like a visual representation of the choice we all face.
A choice with eternal consequences.
The peace and solace of those who are saved versus the turmoil and suffering of those who aren't. It's a pretty stark reminder
It is.
that our choices really do matter.
What we believe, how we live, it all has an impact.
So even though this chapter doesn't spell it out, it definitely makes us think,
Ask ourselves some tough questions.
yeah, what path am I on?
That's a powerful question.
This isn't just an ancient story. It's a message for us today.
Absolutely.
A call to look inward, to examine our own hearts,
To figure out what really matters.
and to choose the path. That leads to eternal life.
This is heavy stuff,
It is.
but it's important.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the most profound insights come from wrestling with the things we don't understand.
That's so true.
Okay, so where do we go from here? What's the next layer of this deep dive? Revelation 7, it's like it's holding up this mirror,
Yeah.
showing us these two paths and asking us, which one are you on?
is powerful.
It is kind of exhilarating, but also a bit scary.
Definitely a call to action.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes Revelation so fascinating. It's not just predicting the future. It's like it's saying, pay attention. This matters for you right now.
Yeah, it's like those choose-your-own-adventure books.
Totally.
Except the stakes are way higher. But even with all this tribulation and judgment, there's this thread of hope running through it all.
You're right. It's like you can't escape it.
You can't.
I think it speaks to the heart of the Christian message. Even when things are bad, even when it feels dark, there's always that promise of redemption.
Like that image of the white robes
Yeah.
being washed clean, made new. No matter what you've done, how far you've strayed, God's grace is still there.
And it's not just about forgiveness. It's about being changed, about living differently, reflecting God's love in the world.
So it's not just about escaping the tribulation. It's about being that light, that hope in the midst of it.
Exactly.
Makes me think of those people who volunteer in disasters or dedicate their lives to helping others. They're living out that message, aren't they?
They are. They're showing us that even in the darkest times, they're still good, that the human spirit can shine through.
And they're choosing to be part of the solution, you know?
Yeah, it's inspiring.
It really is. It makes me want to be more intentional about living out my own faith. But before we wrap up, there's one thing I keep coming back to. That silence at the beginning of the chapter.
The angels holding back the winds.
Yeah, that tension. It's like the whole world is holding its breath.
It's a powerful image. It
Yeah.
pulls you in.
Yeah.
It makes you pay attention.
It does.
I think it's reminding us that even when everything's chaotic and loud, there's this deep stillness in God's presence.
like an invitation to be quiet,
And to listen.
to really hear God's voice.
That's beautiful. This has
Yeah.
been an amazing deep dive. So many layers to unpack. Thank you for helping us understand it all.
It's been my pleasure. These ancient texts, they still speak to us today.
They really do.
Yeah.
And to you, our listener, we encourage you to keep exploring Revelation 7. Let it challenge you, inspire you. Ask yourself, what does it mean for me? How can I live differently because of it? Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep